Hello, I'm Soycat, and every country needs electricity, and the UK has become the first G7 nation to exit coal-fired power. The country has been burning coal to make electricity since 1882, but the last remaining plant in Nottinghamshire is being decommissioned as capacity from clean alternatives has allowed it. This is very good news. The ending of burning of coal in the UK is very, very positive, you might think, on environmental grounds, and indeed, the actual last plant being decommissioned is one you might have seen if you've ever been up on the main line towards Sheffield. It is one of the most imposing pieces of energy infrastructure in the country. Seriously, imagine the size of a train here by looking at the train station, and then look at these things. They're ridiculous, and the size and proximity to the train station is always fun, but what does it actually mean that these are being shut down? What does it mean for the energy mix and for the world as a whole? Because electricity is one of the things we all rely on, but it's obviously generated in less than clean ways right now, except in the UK, where we've decided to get rid of it. Well, basically, yeah, this is the end of the 142-year history of burning the particular fossil fuel to produce energy in this country, and you might be therefore thinking like, oh, it's because we're doing renewables, and there is a big part of that. Like, yeah, we have filled a lot of the gap with green alternatives, including solar and offshore wind. However, there is also a continued dependence on volatile natural gas prices, which means that we have the highest energy prices in the developed world. So in other words, we have the cleanest energy in the developed or rich world. We're the first G7 nation, which is the group of 7 very high-end countries, with Russia being the G8 country that's gone missing there, if you're curious. And as you can see, the price for that is that we pay very, very high prices for electricity, particularly in the industrial sector, which is why it's not very profitable to build things or to make things in the UK necessarily, because that, you know, like everything that is made requires electricity, and that electricity is expensive for businesses in particular. Anyway, with that said, now it's worth by the way, this also excludes taxes on it, so like there's another extra layer to what makes this so expensive here, but it is worth mentioning that in the UK we are actually moving towards a greener source of energy, and that is something that we should celebrate. If you look, just like basically every country in the world, as soon as we discovered that you can burn coal, because every source of electricity is basically, can you turn a turbine? You can turn that turbine force into electricity that fuels the grid, and so as soon as we worked out you can burn coal for a really long time and the smoke will turn a turbine, we basically used that, and it was the main source of energy for basically the deep history of the country. In the 60s and 70s, other sources took over, but it wasn't until like the 90s that we really dipped below 50% of our electricity coming from coal, which makes it extra impressive if you think about it that way, that in 1990, 62% of all energy required coal, and in 2026, when the plant is fully decommissioned and is turned, by the way, into a very cool looking site, if the East Midlands Development Company are to be believed, I think it's going to be, I hope that these are going to be on the sites of the old coal-fired things, but yeah, I think what's really cool about this is that in the future, that there is clearly going to be no coal. But, as you can probably work out from this graph, in 1990, the natural gas import was about 1.45%, whereas in 2023, when coal was at 1%, gas was at 37%. So, in effect, about 25 to 20, you know, about, I guess as the overall gap, about a third or so of that gap has been filled by renewables, which is hugely positive. That is a big win, as we need more electricity for everything we do. It's good that we're generating some more of that with renewables, but lots of that comes from the burning of natural gas. And I think to the end user, you might say, wait, so you've stopped burning coal and now you're burning gas and you're saying that's a green win? And it actually is to some extent. Gas is a much better for the environment fuel, but it is also more price volatile. And so that is why we have the highest prices for electricity in the developed world, which is not something you want to be really that proud of. And so I guess you could then say, like, okay, why is it that we don't actually just fully move into renewables? And this is the fun thing that I think is maybe worth sharing in this video, because a lot of people, when they talk about energy, they've got some weird agenda they want to share about, oh yeah, there's actually a bunch of jobs in this industry that I don't like, or I have feelings about it. But instead, let's just say, let's ignore the worldwide environment, because we clearly don't make a big impact on it. You can see that despite the UK moving away from coal is still a good just over a third of the world's energy. Gas has gone up, which is good. Again, relatively speaking, for fossil fuels, you want to use gas and not coal if you have to use one of the two. But you can see the rest of it has stayed roughly flat. In fact, in nuclear, and nuclear has gone slightly down, wind has gone slightly up, solar's gone significantly up over the last 10 years, but it still represents, what is this right here, 5% of the energy mix. Wind represents 7% of the energy mix. I think it might be worth explaining why it is that every country, France is a really intriguing example where they have so much invested in nuclear, why is that every country has to have some amount of gas or coal in there. And I think the simplest way to put it is like, you look at a graph of how people use electricity, and you realize that you can't store electricity. Electricity has to be generated the same time it's used. When there is when this coal plant is burning, when there is a coal plant burning in the East Midlands Parkway station, which, by the way, hasn't been burning for the last winter or so, but when this coal plant is burning, immediately as these turbines do their crazy thing with the smoke that comes out of them, at the exact same time, I need to be using that electricity. If I turn off my PC, we'll imagine my PC has anywhere near the drawer of one of these things, they need to turn off the coal generation at the exact same moment. So energy can't be stored, but you do need it to go up and down, and although you could argue that, like, well, solar is perfect for fitting this because as demand is low overnight, there's very little sun. As demand is high, there's a lot of sun. What about days where it's cloudy? What about days where it's... The long story short is that renewable energy does have a slight flaw in it, which is that it can't work all of the time. I think hydropower is actually the only true, like, renewable all-the-time energy, because there's always going to be a waterfall falling, maybe less so than you'd expect, but hydropower is the least used renewable because it only works in some parts of the world, in some places, sometimes, whereas solar, you can just plop down anywhere there's sun. Wind, you can plop down anywhere there's wind, and so as you can see, the UK is a very windy country, and so we've massively increased our wind share, but we can't fully replace coal or gas with it, and indeed the world can't, and the basic reason is that to make this work, you need to have a base level of, electricity. You can say that is, you're going to be your wind if it's always consistently windy on these windy isles, but then you need to work out how you can have this go up and down to match demand. If you generate this amount of electricity all day, the electricity grid fails because you can't have too much electricity in it. If you generate this amount of electricity all day, it fails too. So you need to generate just the right amount, and so you need something that can turn off and on very quickly. And right now, the easiest solutions are nuclear and fossil fuels, basically. Is there a good solution to that? Well, we basically just pretend that we don't have one, because I think a lot of people get really doomer if they think like, oh, so you can't actually ever fully get rid of stuff like this? And the answer is probably not. But if you replace coal with gas, you make the world greener. If you replace if you replace coal with nuclear, you can make the world a lot cleaner. And so that's what we should probably aim to do. If I can have a little moment here, I think the most important thing that is worth knowing is that nuclear is a very, very, very useful stopgap if we want to have no emissions, and if we don't want to have any nuclear fuel sitting in the environment, or if we want to have it all be in France, as I'm sure some of you out there do, then all you've got to do is replace it with something else. Is that gas? Is that is that importing it from someone who does burn gas or nuclear energy? These are the choices. But yeah, this is why the UK got rid of coal, and we're one of the first to do so, and we should be praised for that. But at the same time, we haven't fully decarbonized. It's not that we're a green economy only, that all the electricity comes from green sources. No, it's a bit more complicated. We actually get our electricity from lots of sources, and the biggest one is gas, and gas has gotten a lot more expensive. Is there a good reason why gas would be expensive all of a sudden? Is there like any country in the world that would be responsible for that, or that we would maybe have to sanction them and not buy their gas from them? I can't imagine that there is. I feel like I would know about it if that was happening. I made a joke in a recent video about how, like, oh yeah, those guys to the east of Ukraine are causing problems, and someone's like, are you saying Eastern Ukrainians are the problem? And I'm like, no, to the east of Ukraine. It's the world's largest country. How can you miss it? That was my point. It's Russia. Russia are the ones that maybe cause some problems, and our reaction to their problems that they cause is what causes us to have very expensive gas that has to come all the way from the Middle East or from further afield, and that's what causes it to be very expensive, whereas coal is everywhere all the time. We got a whole continent that's basically filled with it over here, and so therefore, if you want cheap electricity, you can burn coal, and if you want expensive electricity, you can burn gas, which comes from many of the countries that we might not necessarily be on best of terms with. And so do want to share a little fun thing here, which is like, I think that you could just accept this by itself, but I also, part of me says, wait though, so in the UK, we have decided to switch coal for gas and help out the world by a huge percentage. That's true. I think that's a really good thing that we've done. But actually, our dent in the coal use is really not the biggest part of it. If you look at certain parts of the world, you can see that the amount that they are decreasing their coal and replacing it by gas is just not happening at the exact same rate. Let's pick some random countries, by the way. Let's go see what is happening in Kyrgyzstan. In Kyrgyzstan, whoa, all hydropower. You know what? Kyrgyzstan is doing their bit to help out the world. Why aren't we producing hydropower? But more seriously, this is really cool, actually. I feel like I could click on this all day. So in Kuwait, they basically use exclusively gas and oil. It doesn't surprise me that they're doing that. In Latvia, they're using a lot more hydropower. Honestly, you know, good on all these countries using hydropower. But the truth is that the costs are borne individually, but the benefits are drawn by not even the country, by the world. And that is the one problem with decarbonizing electricity, is that it's kind of expensive right now. I think that the ideal state for the world to be in, the reason that people argue for certain places to have tariffs and taxes and subsidies in some cases, is so that you can have a world where you don't have to take the individual hit, where you don't have to have the most expensive electricity in the world to have the greenest electricity in the world, where ideally you should want both. Ideally, if let's see what's going on in Australia. I bet they're burning coal if they're producing so much of it. Man, 46% coal. Come on, Australia, get aboard this. Although you could argue they're even smaller than the UK. I think if you look at the really big countries like the Chinas and the Russias of the world, it's like, yeah, if they're when a country 20 times your size has gone from burning in the same time period that we went from 60 to none, they've gone from 69 to 60. And I imagine, because that's the percentage, if we go in absolute terms, I bet that's actually gone up. Oh man, that's kind of depressing, huh? But that is the thing, is as a world, if we don't solve the cheap abundance of coal, what we're really doing is we're saying, we won't buy that, we'll help the environment, and then China goes, wow, it's cheaper now, and we'll get it instead. And that's why people argue for global solutions, and I think that is the real thing that people forget when they're saying, oh, let's just not help the environment, is not ever the point that I guess green people are saying. What they're actually saying is like, if we have to all pitch in to save the planet, maybe we should all pitch in to save the planet, is I guess the anti-globalist view on that one. Personally, I think that it's a good thing if we can decarbonize the economy, and ideally it would be something that can pay us dividends. I personally, as someone who has looked into the individual prospects of solar, it looks like something where you can invest a bunch in renewables now and reap those dividends in the future, and the one which seems to be the most profitable is always nuclear, and so maybe we should make investments. Maybe we should, in the same way that France ends up with cheap electricity despite high taxes and despite all their problems with it, they can end up producing so much electricity they export it to the world and start making a bunch of money for their country. I think that could be a good goal for a country. One day we should, if in my world where I say, if I say the most common talking point, which is like, well, why are we dealing with this if China's only going from here to there? Maybe one day we should get to the point where their coal energy, which is cheap and abundant, looks ridiculous compared to ours, because we have a much better source, which right now looks like it is either hydropower, depending on where you live, but only in some parts of the world, or nuclear, because gas seems like it's just a halfway to there to coal. Anyway, I think this video was a little bit off on the deep end. Let's end this with a nice positive point. Let's go. I recently visited Vietnam. Let's see their energy mix. Oh, they're using a lot more coal. Let's end this video on a positive note. Let's. I'm excited to go to some random Caribbean islands. That's 90% oil. How does that? That is so fascinating. I'm excited to... I've got my Algerian family. I bet they love that they're already all the way on gas. Good job, Algeria. Good job, Albania. Wow. There are some countries who have nailed this electricity thing. I've got to say, there are some countries that haven't. Let's be fair. Botswana, maybe maybe fix that game there. But I am beyond fascinated by how different every country's electricity mix is. And if you want to look for yourself, it's on Our World in Data, where you can see that so many countries have hydropower. So many countries. Anyway, yeah, I want some hydropower. If you're willing to give me any, be sure to go to patreon.com/toycat and you can give me some hydropower. But I wouldn't recommend it. This was a pretty questionable video by the normal standards. I just love infrastructure, and hopefully you do too. Speaking of infrastructure, thank you very much for watching, and be sure to hit that infrastructural like button, because I'll see you in the next one. Should we go look at castles? Yeah, look at this castle. Look how good this castle looks. It's nuts. Can't believe the resolution you get on Google these days. Crazy. Okay, thank you. See you next time. Bye.